Hello. On last week, we began our study on the genre of drama. Drama, unlike other forms of fiction, is directly influenced by its purpose. A play will include references to characters, scenery, and action. Plays also have stage directions. They usually consist of scripted or written dialogue between characters. Plays can be realistic fiction, historical fiction, or even mysteries. Sometimes special types of fiction are also included in plays, like fantasy. Within the genre of drama, you will recognize and explain structures specific to that genre, such as character tags and stage directions. We analyze major plot elements while providing evidence to make inferences about the theme. Let's jump into our learning goal. Today, we will infer multiple themes within text using text evidence. We always infer multiple themes. Remember, the theme is the lesson or moral of the story. It's the playwright's main message. We will explain the structure in drama, such as character tags, acts, scenes, and stage directions. And finally, we will always make inferences about text and use text evidence to support our understanding. Make inferences and use evidence to support our understanding. Academic vocabulary. We have words like setting. Remember, the setting is when and where the story takes place. Stage directions. We just mentioned stage directions briefly. Stage directions are written instructions telling the actors what to do. Stage directions are usually written in italics, brackets, or parentheses. They are crucial to the story. Stage directions show us what the actors should do. Scenes. Remember, the action that takes place in a single setting is a scene. When the setting changes, the scene changes. Dialogue. Dialogue is words said by the characters. Dialogue is the words said by the characters. Dialogue, these are the words that are said by the characters. And finally, character tags. Labels before lines of dialogue to show which character is speaking. Character tags. We also have critical vocabulary to the story. But before we get into the critical vocabulary, I would like to share with you a thinking job. As we read, always consider lines from the play, actions from the line. Put these two with your background knowledge or schema and ask yourself, what does this reveal about the character? You see, in plays, the author doesn't always explicitly tell us everything about characters. We must infer by not only looking at the words, but also the actions and our background knowledge. Here's our critical vocabulary. Ascend. Ascend. To ascend is to move or climb upward. Ascend is to move or climb upward. Opposite of ascend is descend. Descend. To go or pass from a higher place to a lower place. When you go from a higher place to a lower place, you are descending. Rampion. Rampion. Can you say the word rampion? A rampion is a particular plant type that can be eaten in salad. Rampion is a particular plant type that can be eaten in salad. Consent. Consent means to give permission. Consent means to give permission. Wretchedness. Can you say the word wretchedness? Wretchedness is feeling sick or very unhappy. Wretchedness is the feeling of being sick or very unhappy. And finally, we have the word enchantress. Can you say enchantress? Long, long ago, it wouldn't be odd to see a fairy tale written that included an enchantress. An enchantress is a woman who uses magical powers to put someone under a spell. So an enchantress is a woman who uses magical power to put someone under a spell. Now, for today's story, we are going to read Rapunzel by the Grimm's brothers. Rapunzel was written by the Grimm's brothers in 1812, but I just could not find the perfect drama that we could use that would address our learning goals. So I took this story from 1812 and I adapted it myself into the form of drama. So again, Rapunzel is a story that was written a long, long, long time ago. But today, I'm going to share with you my adaptation of Rapunzel. Cast of characters: husband, wife, enchantress, which we found out later her name is Dame Gothel, Rapunzel, the king's son, and the narrator. Narrator. There were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length, the woman hoped that the Creator was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared go into it because it belonged to an enchantress who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion, which was called Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it and had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day, and as she knew that she could not get any of it, she started withering away and began to look pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, looking with great concern, "What ails you, dear wife?" Wife: "Ah, if I can't eat some of the rampion, which is in the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man who loved her thought, sooner than let her die, bring my wife some of the rampion myself. Let it cost what it will. At twilight, he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it greedily. It tasted so good to her, so very good, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again. But when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. Enchantress, how can you dare descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it. Husband, oh, let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not gotten some to eat. Think about the playwright's use of figurative language in line 6. Let mercy take the place of justice. Why do you think the playwright uses figurative language in line 6? Let's reread. The husband says, let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not gotten some to eat. In this case, the playwright uses figurative language in line 6 to emphasize the husband's wanting the enchantress to forgive him. He acknowledges that he's wrong, but he's like, please, I know I'm wrong, but please understand why. In other words, I am acknowledging that I've done a bad deed, but could you please forgive me? Now, notice the strategy I just used. Sometimes when we read, we come across figurative language. We have to break down words for meaning. Go back, read it again. Pay attention to all of the little clues as you read. Let mercy take the place of justice. Please forgive me. Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, Enchantress, if the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will, only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother. Narrator. The man in his terror consented to everything. Remember, consented means to give permission. The man in his terror consented to everything. And when the baby was born, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Scene 2. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower, which lay in a forest, and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, Enchantress, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. Rapunzel had magnificently long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then the hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. Then he heard a song which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her and look for the door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once when he was thus standing behind a door, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried. Now, think about the playwright's use of figurative language. The singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. We think about the literal meaning first. Can singing really touch your heart? Can singing physically touch your heart? That's how we know the playwright is using figurative language. So what does this mean? Let's go back and reread. We have to reread to analyze the text. The king's son wanted to climb up to her and looked for the door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. What do you think the playwright is saying? For me, is he loved the singing. The singing inspired him. It made him perhaps admire her. He was drawn to it. He loved the singing, and he felt some type of emotion. And it's a positive emotion. Enchantress looking upward. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. Prince, or the king's son, looking up and down at Rapunzel's hair. If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune. And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, King's son, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. Narrator. Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man such as her eyes had never yet beheld came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had left him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Let's think about the author's use of imagery in line 18. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. What do you think it means? For me, it's he just couldn't stop thinking about her. He had to see Rapunzel. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome too, she thought about it. Rapunzel, he will certainly love me more than that old Dame Gothel does. And she said yes, and laid her hand in his. Rapunzel, I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you some silk every time you come, and I will weave a ladder with it, and when that is ready, I will descend. Remember, descend means to come down. And you will take me on your horse. They agreed that until that time, he should come for her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this, until once Rapunzel said to her, Rapunzel, tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son. He is with me in a moment. Enchantress, shouting angrily. Ah, you wicked child, cried the enchantress. What do I hear you say, Enchantress? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me. Narrator. In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice round her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snap, they were cut, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. She cut Rapunzel's hair. She was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, however, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair, which she had cut off, to the hook of the window. And when the king's son came and cried, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, she let the hair down. Now, I want to introduce you to the concept of foreshadowing. Can you say the word foreshadow? Foreshadowing or foreshadow. Foreshadowing is a literary device we find in fiction. It creates an atmosphere of suspense in a story so that the readers are interested and want to know more. Good readers pay attention to these hints of what's to come. Think about it. We, the readers, we know that Rapunzel is not there, but the king's son does not. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of foreshadowing in this case? The answer is clear. The playwright is building our anticipation of what might happen next. We, the readers, can infer what the enchantress will do next based on her past behavior. The king's son ascended, but instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress. Enchantress gazing at him with wicked and venomous looks. I would be honored to get Rapunzel for you. Do you think she would really be honored to get Rapunzel? Well, narrator, the king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his wife, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did naught but lament or cry and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. How sad. Scene 3. Thus he roamed about in the misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. And when he approached, Rapunzel knew him and fell on his neck and wept. Two of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, as well as his family, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happy and content. Wasn't that a great story? Now, let's go back and let's think about the main theme of the story. For us, there were multiple themes, but I was trying to think about the main theme. What do you think the theme of the story could be? Remember our theme board that we used when we did our unit on traditional tales? We can still use our theme board with drama. Remember, the theme is the message, the lesson or moral of the story. And as readers, we must ask ourselves the big idea or the lesson the author wants us to take away. That is the theme. So for me, I jotted down some key elements in the story. This was a story of love. This was a story of real love. So I thought about it. Although Rapunzel was in bad shape in the forest, even when the king's son could see again, he maintained his same love for her. He loved her in spite of her wretchedness. Also, I thought about the husband's love for his wife. His love for his wife blinded his ability to see potential dangers of stealing. He knew it was wrong. In fact, he asked for mercy in place of justice. But he was so blinded by his love for his wife and wanting to please her. If that wouldn't have happened, the rest of the story couldn't have occurred. And also, I thought about this fact. Although the king's son was literally blinded by the thorns, it was his love for Rapunzel in his blindingness. Even though he was blinded, his love for Rapunzel was still strong. And the love led him back to his wife, although blind. So for me, the main thing is love is blind. Love is blind. Why? The king's son was literally blind. The husband's love for his wife blinded his decision making. And although Rapunzel was in bad shape, it was the blindness of the king's son that allowed him to find her. Love is blind. Here's your exit ticket for today. I want you to look at your favorite show on TV. Pay attention to the stage directions. Now, will you have a script? Absolutely not. But when you pay attention to characters doing certain actions, for instance, your favorite character might put a cup on the table. She or he read stage directions that told the person what to do. Pay attention to these actions. Pay attention to the lines. Use your thinking skills, your schema, or background knowledge. Put it all together. What does this infer, or what does this reveal about the character? Remember, children, read often as you can, and always read like a writer. Thank you.